Hello everyone. So in the series of video lectures about variables and data measurement techniques in research, this is lecture number 3 and today we'll talk about variables and types of variables. So prior to this, we talked about the concept of analytics, we talked about business analytics, data measurement and the need for developing a scale of measurement. Now we'll talk about variables and types of variables, then we'll proceed towards types of analysis followed by central tendency, and then finally the last lecture of this series would be types of measurement scale. Now the need to study the variable is that the reason is that uh, when we talk about a researcher, the researcher collects a lot of data. Okay, so when data is collected, but problem is that how to analyze that data, what type of statistical test to be applied for that. So while collecting the data, we need to study the concept of variable. Variable is the central idea in every research. Now let's talk about an example of gender. Okay, so when we talk about gender, then gender could be having two categories or three categories. Okay, on your screen you can see there are different categories like male and female. Now in this case, the variable would be gender and the category would be male and female. So main variable or the main characteristics or here in this case is the gender, and gender is explained with the help of male or female, or maybe other category also, third also. Okay, so here in this case the variable is gender and there are two categories. So variable is a quantity that varies over a period of time. Variable is different from the constant. Constant is a value that always remains same, whereas variable keeps on changing. Let's talk about some more examples. Now, for example, residential status. Now, residential status of any individual may be rural or urban. Okay, so again, this is a case of variable. Marital status, maybe someone may be married, single, divorced, widow. So these are the different values. Okay, this is not a constant, so this varies from person to person. Let's talk about example number third, family income. Family income is again a variable. It also varies from person to person. It may take any value. Somebody is unemployed, somebody is not earning, then the value will be zero, and someone is working or someone is employed, then the person may be earning maybe in rupees or maybe in any figure. So again, this varies. And let's talk about one more example. So age is not a constant. It keeps on changing over a period of time from person to person. Even for an individual also, the person who is living, um, who is alive, the age will not remain same. It will keep on changing on day-to-day basis, every daily basis. Now let's talk about one more example: a person's attitude towards goods and services tax. Okay, now person's attitude towards goods and services tax. It is a statement and it is an item. Now we want to understand, we want to study the feedback of the person. Now the person may reply in different format, may in a different way. The reply may not be specific. So in this case, the person may say strongly agree, or the person may say strongly disagree also. The attitude of the person, or the positive attitude or the negative attitude or the opinion of the person about the acceptability of the goods and services tax, GST. And so let us say we are asking this question and we want to study the feedback. The feedback or the response of the individual may vary from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Now there could be a variability in the scale, so we can measure this response on a 3-point scale, 5-point scale, or even 7-point scale also, popularly known as Likert scale. So these are the some examples of variables. So variable is defined as anything that has a quantity or quality that varies over a period of time. So as I discussed in the previous slide also, so variable doesn't remain same, it keeps on changing over a period of time. Okay, so the variable is an attribute. It is an attribute that describes person, place, thing, or idea. So this is an attribute. Variable is an attribute that describes a person, place, thing, or idea, and it can take on two or more values, any values. There is no single specific value for a variable. If there is a specific value, then that is not a variable, that would be constant. Now it may change from group to group, person to person, or even within one person over a period of time. As we talked about the personal characteristics like age, weight, So they keeps on changing over a period of time. Now, a variable may be a situation specific. Okay, it is always related to a specific situation. For example, gender is a variable, but in a particular situation, like if you want to conduct a study or a research on, let us say, Bollywood star, then let us say if we are conducting study on the actresses only, Bollywood actresses. So in this case, the like one variable is what the gender. So in this case, the variable will remain same. So we are sure that we are conducting study on the actresses, so obviously they are female, so it means the gender will remain same. So in this case, the gender will behave like a constant, it will not be act like variable. Okay, and let us say if you are restricting our study, or if you are like for conducting study on Bollywood star, in that study we are not specifying on actor or actresses. Okay, so in that case the gender, the variable gender may behave like a variable, it will not behave like a constant. Okay, whereas if we specify our, if we restrict our research to actresses, Bollywood actresses, in that case we are already aware that the gender is female, so in that case that the gender will behave like a constant. Okay, now types of variables may be qualitative, quantitative. If we talk about qualitative variable, then qualitative variable are non-metric variable, we can't quantify them. Okay, so that is why these are qualitative in nature. Now second type of variables are quantitative, or we can call them as metric variable, we can easily um, measure them. Okay, even we can measure non-metric variable also, but qualitative and quantitative, these are the different types of variable. Now, when we talk about quantitative variable, then they are basically in numerical or mathematical format. Quantitative variable means whose information can be measured or written down in numbers. Okay, we can quantify. For have a and these type of quantitative variables always have some measurement unit. For example, height, weight, income. There is a measurement unit. Okay, for example, height may be measured in centimeters, meter, feet. Even weight may be measured in kgs, gram, and similarly, income is obviously income may be measured in any specific currency also, even in rupees, dollars also, pound also. So this is about the quantitative or metric variables. Now let's talk about qualitative variable or non-metric variable. Qualitative variable are the also known as categorical variable. Okay. In the previous slides, we talked about the gender as a variable. Okay. So if we talk about the different categories, then there could be male, female, like this. These are the different possibilities. These different subcategories defines that gender as a variable. Okay, so qualitative variable are also called as categorical variables, and these variables are not in numerical format, they are not numerical. These type of variable describes data that fit into categories. Okay, now let's talk about some examples. For example, gender, marital status, or type of school. For example, when we talk about gender, I discussed this example earlier also, so male or female. Okay, and if you talk about marital status, married, unmarried, so again these are the different categories of a variable. And type of school, school may be private, or let's say public school also. So these are the, again these are the example of variable, but they are qualitative in nature. We can't quantify them exactly. For example, gender, we can't quantify gender. Marital status also we can't quantify. Even a school also we can't quantify. Whereas if we talk about a variable like height, weight, income, we can easily quantify them. So this is the difference between quantitative variable and qualitative variable, or metric variable versus non-metric variable. Now, when we talk about quantitative variable or metric variable, further there are three different types of sub-variables. So, quantitative variables are numerical or mathematical in nature. This we talked earlier also. Second category is the discrete variable, and third category is the continuous variable. Okay, so numerical, discrete variable, or continuous variable. These are the three different variables. Or metric variable. There are three types of metric variable: quantitative, discrete, and continuous variable. We can easily quantify them. Okay, so let's talk about discrete variables. So when data is taken from some counting or a continuous process, the process is in continuous format, it's continuous, then we'll call that data as, that variable as discrete. Okay, for example, number of patient in the different wards of a hospital, number of nurses, number of hospitals in different cities. Okay, so this is always counted as a continuous process. Okay, so that is the reason we are calling this as discrete variables. Okay, so when data is taken from some counting or continuous process, then we'll call it as discrete variable. Now let's talk about continuous variable. The term continuous itself indicates something is in progress. So when data is taken from some measuring process, okay, some ongoing process which is not going to stop, okay, so we'll call that as continuous variable. For example, height. So height keep on changing over a period of time. So someone may be having a height 160 centimeter on a particular day or at particular age. Later on the height may change, height may increase, it will obviously it will definitely increase only. So the change in the height may be not proportional, but it will keep on increasing. So again this variable is changing. Now we don't have a set of separate number, but an infinite reason of values. Okay, we can't specifically predict, or we can't specifically mention the count, the value, but it it will keep on changing over a period of time. Okay, so other examples may like income, weight, temperature, blood pressure, even sugar level. Okay, so these are the examples of continuous variable. They keep on changing over a period of time. So this involves a process, continuous process. Now, let's talk about qualitative variable. Now, initially we talked about quantitative variable or metric variable. Now we'll talk about qualitative variable, also known as non-metric variable. So these variables are also called as categorical variable. Okay, categorical variables. Such variables are not numerical. We can't quantify them easily. These type of variable describes the data that fit into category. Okay, fit into category is the only consider. For example, gender, we talked about this earlier also. This case, this gender as a variable, male, female, or even transgender also, there could, these are the different categories. Marital status, married, unmarried, single, these are the different categories of marital status. Now let's talk about some more example. Some smoking. Okay, so someone may be smoker or someone may be non-smoker. Even if we talk about individuals characteristics or like personality of someone's nature, so someone may be helpful, someone may not be helpful. So these are the different categories of the variable, and we can't easily quantify them. Okay, we can understand them, we can define them, but we can't quantify them. So that is the reason these types of variables are known as qualitative or non-metric variable. Now let's discuss this with a mathematical equation. Okay, in this equation you can see on your screen x plus 4 is equal to 7. So a letter that represent an unknown number mathematically, if we talk about this equation, x plus 4 is equal to 7. Now this is a hypothetical example. In this case, a variable, we are adding a number constant. In this case we are adding 4 to a unknown variable, unknown number, unknown, which is x, and the result is 7. So we have a equation that we are adding a 4 number 4 to a unknown value, and the result is we are the result we are getting is 7. So the variable x is the number which keeps on changing. Okay, so we'll talk about different type of variables also. Generally there are two broad categories or two broad type. One is independent variable and dependent variable. Now dependent variable is always dependent upon independent variable. Okay, or we can call it as independent variable is the cause and dependent variable is the effect. Or independent variable is manipulated. We keep on changing the values of the independent variable as a result, and ultimately we get a dependent variable, or we get some effect. So cause leads to the effect, or manipulated variable leads to the measured value. All right, now in same equation, if I keep on changing the value of x, I will get the total as different value. Let us say if the value of x is 1, the total would be not equal to 7 but some other value. If I change again the value of x as 2, then again the result may be 6, but it is not equal to 7. If I keep the value of change the value of x as 3, then the total may be 7. If I change the value of x as 4, the total may be 8. So the result is changing with the change in independent variable. Now on your screen again you can see a image, and which explains the relationship of the independent variable, dependent variable, and control variable. Okay, now you can see a flower pot or a plant, and it's like you can identify the role of independent variable and dependent variable. Okay, the pot itself is behaving like a control variable in this case, and dependent variable is like water, and dependent variable is plant. So the one thing that you can change, what you can change, we can change the quantity of the water or the fertilizer. So this will behave like independent variable. All right. So the one thing you can change, or the limit to only one in an experiment. Okay. Now dependent variable is what? The change that happens because of the independent variables. Now let us say if we are adding some water, if we keep on giving some water to the flower, to the plant in a pot, then definitely the plant height will grow, plant will grow up. Okay. So it is dependent upon what? So dependent is the plant's height, and independent is the water or the fertilizer. Now, what is the role of the control variable? In this case, the control variable role is played by the pot itself. Okay, so pot or the vase itself. So everything you want to remain constant and unchanging. That is the control. So the pot or the vase is behaving like the as a role of control variable. Okay, let's talk about one more example which explains about variable and relationship with the construct. Construct will discuss about this concept in the upcoming slide also. Now variable and construct. So a variable is an attribute or characteristic stated in a specific or applied way. Okay, whereas construct is what? Construct is an attribute or the characteristics expressed in an abstract general way. Now let's consider an example. If you talk about student achievement, okay, student achievement may be a construct. It is a general term. But if you talk about the variable, then grade point average, okay, students grade point or students CGPA, SGPA, this could be the variable which defines the construct. So student achievement could be defined by the grade point average achievement. So here variable is defining the construct. Now on your screen you can see there is a table which there are different aspects also, like meaning, nature, role in the research, need for precision, and this table differentiate the meaning of constructs versus variable. On the right side of the screen you can see a example is mentioned. If we talk about the demographic variable of any individual, the demographic profile may be defined by gender, age, education, marital status, residential. These are some few examples. Okay, now in this case, the what is construct? Construct is the demographic profile or the demographic characteristic, and measured variable are the different variable: gender, age, education, marital status, residence, because they are explaining this construct, they are explaining this demographic profile. So this is the relationship of construct versus variable. Now if you look at the table on the left side of the screen, there are two examples also. Intelligence is a construct, and now what about variable? The number of words remembered is a variable used to assess intelligence. Okay, now again intelligence is a broader term. Now it is a construct. This could be defined with the help of what? This is defined by the number of words remembered. Okay, so again there could be different characteristics that define a construct. So different variable define a construct. Now let's talk about one more example of the personality. And if we consider personality as a construct, then what could be the variable? The score on an introversion or extroversion test. Okay, the extroversion tests are variable measuring an aspect of personality. So this is how we use the different variables to define a, or to formulate a construct. Okay, so it constructs is a theoretical or conceptual uh, concept. Okay, it is theoretical or conceptual in nature, whereas variable is empirical and measurable. We can always and we can easily measure a variable, whereas construct is a conceptual term or theoretical aspect. Okay, construct represent what we want to study. What we want to study, it is a broader term, whereas variable represent how we measure what we want to study. Now some more theories mention about the construct, although we have covered this concept in the previous slides also. So in qualitative research, it is very important to first explore the key construct and underlying measures. So whenever we are conducting any research, specifically in case of qualitative research, we need to identify the role of the construct, and then we further uh, get into the different types of variables. Okay, so construct need to be translated from abstract mental ideas or mental abstractions into more concrete, measurable, and testable form in research. Now, this is when the term measure comes into use. Measures define the attributes associated with the construct. Given constructs are broad and abstract in nature, it is important to associate some measures to understand the construct. Now let's talk about one more example. Let's talk about trauma. Okay, for example, the idea of trauma. We cannot observe or measure trauma directly, though we can understand that an individual may be traumatized, but we cannot express how much or what exactly triggered that trauma. Okay, even if we could say what caused the trauma, but that may not be accurate as other phenomena such as someone's height or age. We can predict that. Okay, we can specifically mention about that, the reasons. Okay, but what could be the reason of the trauma? So that may accurately, we may not be able to explain that accurately. Okay, now we'll talk about this, the relationship of construct and variable using the case of or the idea of trauma. Now on your screen you can see a graphic, infographic. On the in the first column you can see the construct is trauma. Okay, how we will measure this? Now this could be measured with the help of cause, type, effect, or behavioral manifestations. Okay, now when we talk about causes, so what we will do, we'll try to find out what are the causes of trauma. Okay, now type of trauma, so what is childhood trauma, what is intergenerational trauma, then effect, what is disruptive behavior. Now behavioral manifestations, how does trauma affect the behavior, what is the window of tolerance. Now so in this case, the construct is trauma, and we are trying to study with different variables or different factors how we will going to will try to will measure this construct. So construct is always measured with the help of variables. Now some more example on the variable. Height, for example, height or age, stress, score on the depression test. Okay, number of bystanders to an emergency. So there are different possibilities. There are the different cases related to the variable. Now dependent variable and independent variable, and further there are different types like experimental or measured variable. We'll talk about different types of variable in detail. So independent variable is presumed the cause of dependent variable, the presumed effect. Okay, dependent variable is one which changes in relationship to the changes in another variable. Okay, an experimental and measured variable, the experimental variable spell out the details of the investigator manipulations, while the measured variable refer to measurement. Now data is a specific measurement of variable. Now we'll talk more about quantitative versus categorical variable. Okay, we discussed about the difference between these earlier also. We'll get into more detail. So data is specific measurement of a variable. It is the value you record in your data sheet. Okay, data is generally divided into two categories: quantitative and categorical data. Now categorical data is, again, you may call it as qualitative data also. So the variable contains quantitative data is a which is a metric variable or quantitative variable. A variable that contains categorical data is categorical variable. Each of these types of variable that can be further broken down into further types like quantitative variable, categorical variable. We talked about quantitative data and categorical data. These are related to quantitative variable as well as and then categorical data is related to categorical variable. Okay. Now on your screen you can see there are four categories of variable: dependent variable, independent variable, demographic, and extraneous variable. Okay, so examples of dependent variable, dependent variable means the variable whose outcome is dependent on another variable. Okay, independent variable, the term itself indicates the variable which acts independently and is unaffected by the outcome of others. Okay, and demographic is again an example or type of variable, maybe age, gender, marital status, location, place of residence. These are some cases, some examples of demographic. Now, extraneous variable, it is a hidden variable which acts silently to affect another variable. Okay, let's talk about the success of a student in academics. Okay, so the success of a student in academics may be dependent upon so many different variables, not only upon the student's performance in continuous assessment or the test or the written exams. There could be different factors, maybe attendance also, maybe punctuality also, maybe the IQ level of the student also. So there are different variables. Sometimes variables are hidden also, so they again, but they silently affect another variable also. Now on your screen you can see these are further categorized into different categories. I am talking about variables, different types of variables used in research. So dependent variable, we talked about this. Independent also. Now further there are other categories also: intervening variable, confounding variable, extraneous variable. This we talked in the previous slide also. Now when we talk about independent variable, there could be different categories or different types of independent variable. For example, treatment variable, which is the variable which is being treated; measured variable, which is measured; controlled variable, which is controlled and the relationship between different variable is tested; moderating, which acts as a moderator, so moderating variable. Also, in the previous slide, we were talking about different types of variables. So these are dependent variable, independent variable, treatment variable, measurement variable, and three more variables. So now some more content is presented here just for your convenience. So you can go through this content also with the example. Now these are three additional variables, like out of those seven type of variable: controlled independent variable. We talked about different types of independent variables, moderating variables, intervene variables. The examples are mentioned. Okay, if we talk about moderating variable, for example, um, if you want to study the students' academic performance, the intelligence, IQ, gender, age, these types of variable could play uh, the role of moderating variable. We'll talk about the concept of moderating and mediating variable in the upcoming slides also. Intervene variable, okay, intervene between dependent and dependent variable. Now some examples are again mentioned for your convenience. Co-founding variable, okay, these are the like these play a role of hidden variables, cannot be separated from the experiment or the study. Okay, for example, like researchers and unintentional bias. Okay, then extraneous variable, okay, such variable which affects the relationship of dependent variable and independent variable. Such variables are not studied by the researcher intentionally in an experiment or a research. Now this is the same similar slide we discussed earlier also. This explains about the discuss about the different types of variable with a focus on different types of treatment variable. Okay, so treatment variable, measured independent variable, controlled independent variable, moderating variable, treatment variable. So these are all are related to independent variable. Now let's talk about the example. Okay, so this is a similar slide just I discussed now. Now there are some example. For example, effect of study. You want to conduct a study, let us say, on the effect of online teaching in achievement. Online teaching in the achievement in mathematics subject. Okay, we want to study the achievement of the students in mathematics subject. So in this case, independent variable is what? The teaching method. Okay, and dependent variable is what? We want to study the achievement in what? Achievement in mathematics. So independent variable is teaching method and dependent is achievement in mathematics. Now what is the role played by different types of variable? Okay, there could be different other variables also, but here we are considering an example. So if we talk about in treatment variable, now in this case the role of the treatment variable could be played by controlled variable, independent controlled independent variable, moderating variable, treatment variable. Now controlled independent variable may be like knowledge of any basic computer course or basic computer subject or any other subjects, okay, which may help in mathematics. So that could be a controlled variable. Moderating variable, obviously, we can consider as intelligence also. This intelligence could be a moderating variable. Treatment variable is what we want to treat. So what is our objective? Effect of online teaching. Okay, effect of online teaching in achievement of in mathematics subjects. Okay, so here the treatment variable is online teaching. Now if we talk about intervening variable and co-founding variables, so intervening variable is what? Students lack of interest. Okay, we may be interested to study the students lack of interest. That could be again a variable. Confounding variable means the teacher's focus. Okay, so how teacher is focusing to improve the performance of the student or in the online teaching for the achievement of student in mathematics subject. Now extraneous variable, the role of extraneous variable may be played by home environment of the student. Okay, so this may also affect the student's performance. Even parental support. Okay, so this could be these variable may play the role of extraneous variable. Now there is an image on your screen which explains the relationship between independent and dependent variables. So as I mentioned earlier also, independent variables like a cause, and dependent variable is the effect of that cause. Okay. For example, if we the volume of the water, if we give add some water to a plant, and we get the result after a few days, we see a flower coming up in that plant. Okay, so in this case, the effect is what? Effect is the result. It is a dependent variable. Now again you can see there is a image which discuss about the independent variable and dependent variable. So variable independent is variable that is change, whereas independent is the variable affected by the change. Okay, so let's talk about this example in detail. So amount of water, if we change the amount of water, this may lead to the result. What is the result? What could be the effect? The size of the plant will change, number of leaves may change, increase. The plant may be like in the condition of the plant may change. It may be living or it may become dead also. So these are the effects, likely possible effects, depending upon the amount of water or even the fertilizer also, but mainly that depends upon the water, amount of water. If you don't add any water, obviously the plant may not survive. We may not getting flower out of it. Okay, but at the same time, if we add excessive water, then also the plant may not substantially grow. Okay, so we need to add sufficient or limited quantity of the water also. So again, that also depends. Now this is how we can relate the independent variable and dependent variable in this case. Now on the right side of the screen you can see the relationship or the comparison of dependent and dependent variable also. Now type of variable: independent, dependent, control. Okay, you can see again similar example. We have three flower pots or the plant A, B, C. Okay, now in case of A, the liquid used to water each plant. Okay, liquid is used. Second, what we are discussing, what is our focus? In second case, we are interested to study the dependent variable. So what is the dependent? The height or the health of the plant. In the independent category, first category, we are looking at the liquid or the water quantity used to water each plant, how much water we are adding to the plant. Second is the dependent variable. What is dependent? In this case, what we want to study, the change that happens because of the independent variable. So the height or the health of the plant. Okay, now third is controlled variable. So everything you want to remain constant and unchanging. What is being kept constant in this case? Now here in this case we are more concerned about number one, water or the liquid. What we are adding? Are we adding water? Are we adding any juice or any other chemical or any other liquid? So that is a one category, one factor, one variable. Second is the plant or the height of the plant, and third is what? The pot. Okay, in which we are growing that plant. Okay, so these are the three different types of variable: independent, dependent, and control. Now we'll talk more about the control variable. Okay, let's talk about the case of the growth of the plant. Okay, now if the plant is exposed to some other light. Okay, now we may be exposing that plant with any other type of any type of the light. Now let us say the light color is different. Okay, So light, if we are keeping light color as a yellow or orange, let us say orange light, and if you are changing the light color as red for few days, then is this going to make any impact on the height of the plant? So again, this could be a different type of variable. So independent variable, again light color could be an independent variable, and dependent variable would be the height of the plant. Okay, now what is the role of control variable in this case? Water, yes, water is obviously we talked about the color of the, we want to study the impact of the color on the height of the plant. But control variable, the role of control variable would be played by the soil, the water, the temperature, the day and night time also. What time we are giving this, we are giving light to the plant. So these different factor could play, or these are the different variables which will control the, which may control the uh, height of the plant. Okay. So in this slide, we talked about the relationship of independent variable, dependent variable, and different control variables. Now let's talk about mediating variable and moderating variable. So as of now, we are focusing our discussion on independent variable, type of independent variable, and its impact on dependent variable. But there is a role of mediator and moderator also. Okay. So mediator affects the relationship of independent and dependent variable. So independent variable leads to the mediator, mediator leads to the dependent variables. Whereas the moderator impacts, a moderator may create a impact on the relationship independent and dependent variable. So on your screen you can see four types of broad variables: independent and dependent. But there are two types of variable: mediator and moderator. So they may affect the relationship of these variables. So this is almost similar image that I shared in the previous slide, which discuss about the role of mediator and moderator. So mediator is what? It shows the connection, linkage, and moderator is what? It is changing strength and the direction. Okay. So moderator always discuss about the changing strength and the direction, whereas mediator shows the connection. Now again, one more example is mentioned on your screen, which discuss about the mediator, mediation and moderation. Okay. So there are two variables x and y. So they are connected by a variable me, which is mediation, mediator. Now in the second image on the right side, you can see x is independent variable and y is dependent variable. So their relationship is being tested or affected by mo. Mo is moderating variable. So let's talk about one more example. For example, self-esteem. Okay, let's talk about self-esteem. So it's a hypothetical example. So self-esteem mediates the relationship between grades and happiness. Okay. Now, in this case, now independent or the predictor variable is the grade, and what is the result? Result is happiness. Okay, so we want to study the impact of grades of a student on the happiness of a student. Okay, and so there could be a direct effect, direct relationship, and there could be a mediating role also. Mediating role of what? Mediating role of, here we are discussing about self-esteem. So in this case we can study the role of self-esteem on happiness also. Okay, so the effect could be, the in this case the effect would be indirect effect. Okay, so a mediator variable is a variable that explains the relationship between predictor variable and the criterion variable. So predictor variable is the independent variable. Okay, and criterion variable is the dependent or outcome variable. So predictor variable is also known as independent variable, and criterion variable is known as dependent variable. So we are uh, trying to study the impact of predictor variable on criterion variable. Now again, one more example, relationship between salary and job performance. And if you want to study the relationship, let us say in this case, independent variable is salary and dependent variable is job performance. Okay, so we want to study the impact of independent variable, which is salary on job performance. Now this could be studied with the help of another variable, which is moderating variable. Now in this case, the role of moderating variable could be played by motivation. Okay, so moderating variable is a variable that affects the relationship or the strength between the independent and dependent variable. For example, relation between salary and job performance depends on the motivation. So here we are talking about moderation. Previously we were talking about mediation. So in this presentation, we are discussing about the variables and different types of variables. Okay, we just focused on the relationship of independent variable, dependent variable with the help of mediating variable, moderating variables, and types of independent variables also. Now, if we classify different types of variable or analysis, then we can further talk about univariate, bivariate, and multivariate also. Now, what is univariate analysis or univariate? In case of univariate analysis, one variable is analyzed at a time. Okay. Now, for example, examining the average age of the respondent in the study. Now, in this case, the univariate or single variable is age. Okay. Now, if we talk about bivariate, the term bivariate indicates that two variables. Okay, so two variables are analyzed at a time. Okay, for example, studying the relationship between the education level and income. Now, in this case, there are two variables. One is education level, second one is the income. And if we talk about multivariate analysis, then more than two variables are analyzed at a time. For example, analyzing how education, income, and age together influence purchase intention. Now, in this case, there are more than two variables. So, when we talk about single variable, that is univariate. When we talk about bivariate, that is two variable. And when we talk about more than two variable, then it is multivariate study. So, in this presentation, we have discussed about different types of variables in detail. I hope you have liked this lecture. Thank you very much.